On Monday, Donald Trump was inaugurated as the 47th President of the United States, Martin Luther King Day, in the year 2025. In his speech, he spoke about his plans for the country, more specifically, the stance the federal government will take on gender, and I quote, as of today, it will henceforth be the official policy of the United States that there are only two genders, male and female. And to that, I say, Donald Trump, you are wrong. So let's talk about my gender. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I use this channel to talk to myself with you in hopes that I can better understand myself. And if you understand yourself a little bit better in the process, that makes me very happy. And I need that happiness right now in these, to sound like a broken record, unprecedented times. I think there are obviously much more politically savvy people, much more intelligent people in the sphere of the world about what's happening here in the United States who have made it abundantly clear since even before the election what can happen and what will happen in these 4 years and potentially beyond now that Donald Trump is in office. Because, oof. And with the speech and hand signal, hand salute, hand gesture, whatever you want to call it, I don't care, that Elon Musk gave at the end of his speech at the inauguration, we are seeing a lot of things that are reminiscent of 1930s Germany. Hot take, I know. And if you disagree with this, watch the video. Look at it and tell me that I'm wrong. And if you watch it and you still think, yeah, there's more to be said, then I dare you, as many people have, do that hand gesture in public. Go to your job and do it. Do it at a PTA meeting. See what happens. A lot of what is being laid out in these executive orders and a lot of these promises and a lot of the issues that Donald Trump has taken a stand on will not directly affect me. And it breaks my heart for everyone at the border who is legitimately seeking asylum, and for people who are already here and worried that they will be deported and are worried about ICE raids and the end of birthright citizenship, because now the people of the world are also being fed the lie that American citizens have been fed, I guess, our entire lives, which America was this place to find and create and craft your own better life. And I don't think that that's likely to happen for a lot of people. Well, let's be real. If you are of a certain skin tone, or you're from the global south, or you believe in a certain prophet, those are the people who will be unfairly targeted and deported and sent back to where they came from, because that's what this is about. It isn't about protecting America. It's about furthering this really heinous rhetoric and perpetuating, drink every time I say it, a patriarchy, white supremacist nation. And that's where we are now. And if you disagree with me, literally look at these executive orders. I mean, it's an innocuous one comparatively, but I mean, the fact that he wants to rename it the Gulf of America. While a lot of this will not affect me because of the privilege that I have of being white and the privilege I have of being American, what will affect me is his policy on gender. I don't talk about this on this channel, or maybe I really haven't before, but I identify as non-binary, and if we want to get specific with it, I like the term gender fluid, because I think anytime I sort of land on where I think I identify, something changes in me, and then I want to explore something else. And so I never really want to be locked into one specific gender expression. And so I like to flit around between these different forms of expression and what I believe is a mosaic of gender expression, not a binary, not a spectrum, certainly. Because to me, a spectrum implies two ends, fully one thing and fully the other, and everything in between is some kind of combination of those things. And sure, binaries do exist. I'm not denying the existence of binary structures and binary systems, both in the human consciousness and both in nature. But I think gender is so much more than that. And because it is this thing that we created and this thing that we because it is this system of classification that we as humans created to observe the world, I think it allows us to be a little bit more open minded about it and fluid with it. I don't think about gender in a binary because there are gender expressions that are completely absent of either of those binary terms, and to contain those expressions in the binary is false. Thus, a mosaic where everyone can retain their individual identity but still add to this larger picture of humanity. And I started questioning and exploring and seeking understanding of my gender in 2020. For me, I became less and less interested in my gender because I found out through those questionings and through that discovery, I was just discovering that so much of my life and so many of my behaviors and decisions I would make were dictated by this idea of a gender norm or a gendered structure. And how I thought about myself, how I thought I should live my life, and what I should do with my life were all based on these gendered thoughts. And I thought I should do this because I was a man and only men do this. And it was only because of lockdown and the things that forced me to slow down and have more space to think, I started to ask why I did these things in this way. And when I asked why and what makes me a man, every answer I created and crafted for myself, I could easily ascribe to women as well. I was raised by women. My family is a matriarchal family. My mom is one of four sisters, and so my entire childhood is crafted and connected by femininity and by womanhood more than anything else. And the things that I admired about myself in this process, really, of learning how to love who I am and love myself, as I was discovering and learning and naming the things that I admired about myself, more often than not, they were these attributes that were conventionally associated with femininity or women or womanhood, compassion, caring, sensitivity, nurturing. And then I started to change the relationship to my body. I have, as I'm sure many of us do, a really bad body dysmorphia, not even just from gender, but just from working out and just wanting my body to look a very specific way, and all of these images I receive from Hollywood and fitness magazines and God, I sound like a grandma. All these fitness magazines. But this body dysmorphia. But as soon as I started to change that relationship to my body, I began to really understand and feel that I am so much more than the body that I occupy. And because my body has specific parts, and I started to separate myself from identifying with my body, that opened up expression in ways that I never thought possible before. All of this being said, this is my anecdotal experience, and I'm even still learning and unpacking a lot of that stuff myself. And there are a lot of smarter people who study this for a living and understand this so much more and are much better at communicating the difference between gender and biological sex. And I highly encourage you to do your research and just explore and start asking those questions for yourself as well. I'll keep it simple for me. Gender is based on self-expression, and biological sex is based on reproductive organs, chromosomes, hormones. And even this is complicated and not as simple because there is no set level of hormones in the body, and the amount of hormones that we have in our bodies fluctuates over time based on age and diet and genetics. And so to claim to be something because of a hormone level is a little funky for me, at least, because it's a moving target constantly. And so if you have this amount of testosterone in your body, and then this is the standard for what we consider a man, if you have less than the amount of testosterone in your body, are you no longer a man? This is where, this is where these questions, and this is the stuff that I started really questioning and then exploring. Look, the only reason I think we created this binary of gender roles between men and women is predicated on our understanding, our current understanding of our ancestors, and an antiquated view of gender roles because of, again, drink, patriarchy, and white supremacy, and Christian white supremacy. I'll get it at that. Karl Marx said religion is the opiate of the masses. When we are drugged to believe that there are only two genders, we create biases and circumstances to uphold those roles. And based on anthropology, and that the men were hunters and the women were gatherers, and this delineation that we create, this line in the sand, is where we derive all of our contemporary gender norms. Men are hunters, and so they must be strong and assertive and dominant, and women are gatherers, and so they must be more nurturing, compassionate, and patient. And none of this is bad at face value. Like, truly, to even look at it from an anthropological and historical lens, it happened. So it's not a bad thing that these roles exist. I think it becomes an issue when we are taught that men can only be hunters and women can only be gatherers. And even that rhetoric and logic falls flat on its face when we look at the global history of humanity, because if men were hunters, then we learned to farm, and then men became farmers and gatherers. And women have hunted and fought and led armies and have been warriors throughout all of human history. And so there are tribes of entire women who are all warriors. And so this idea of a binary makes less and less sense the more you start to look at history in totality, and not just history in the way to explain where we are in the world now. And even, again, to break out of a colonizer mindset, in that to be white and to be Christian is the right way to think, which it isn't. It isn't. To create this binary denies the primary sources of evidence for indigenous communities of two spirits, the Mushe, Travesti, and the Mapuche, people outside of male and female gender roles who assume these roles as shamans and healers, and so from a indigenous viewpoint as well, and I'm speaking so out of pocket again, throughout all of this, just remember that there are much smarter people who are much more educated on this topic than I am. And if even I have this understanding, there's no excuse to begin learning about this and unpacking that knowledge and unpacking the conditioned thinking that we have around this stuff. But this is across different cultures as well. And so we're seeing this existence of non binary and people outside of a gendered thought, people outside of the male and female gender, through different communities that at the throughout history had maybe little to no interaction whatsoever. And so the fact that these are popping up in these own ways and in different parts of the world must mean something, right? At least worth exploring. And even in Europe, like, for a very long time, women were outlawed from being actors and performers on stage. Sexist. And so men would act as women. That's more of a trite example, but still, I mean, and outside of the culture aspect of it, outside of the cultural understanding of gender, from a biological place, we have intersex people. And there are always exceptions. always these pieces of humanity that will never fit inside of a mold or fit inside of the mold that we have been forced to learn. And look, again, I'm not an expert on this stuff. And so the frustrating thing about this is that this isn't radical thinking. I'm not saying everyone needs to surrender their gender and everyone needs to be non-binary and everyone needs to break away from this binary thinking. It's what is frustrating is the people who constantly want to uphold this binary thinking and uphold these conventional white patriarchal roles of men and women will always move the goalpost of what they consider to believe the existence of trans people. That goalpost is always going to move, and I'm past trying to fight for the existence of trans people or trying to prove that trans people exist. We exist. They exist. Simple. It's now a time of understanding and assimilating and expanding beyond the thing. The culture and the systems that we are existing in right now are clearly starting to crumble, starting to fail. And are we going to continue to hold on to this stuff and let it drag us down into oblivion? Or do we just want to let go of the conventionality that we've been force fed our entire lives and start to expand beyond that? It's never going to be enough until we have clear conversations. And so like this is what kind of frustrates me, especially too, about these like the people who hang on to biology with an iron fist and an iron grip, compared to like other sciences. Look, we're quick to adopt and adapt to new information that we learn about physics, astrology, and medicine, and we're quick to believe that there are these unexplainable phenomena in those things. But when it comes to biology, no, absolutely not. There's no unexplainable stuff or anything outside of anything that's unexplainable. And why does biology need to be held under such heavier constraints and such heavy scrutiny? And then inside of biology, again, this is why I think it's very complicated, because it is this friction between science and culture. Because if something is unexplainable biologically, it's a mutant, it's a mutation. And then that word mutation has been co opted and perverted into something being freaky. And trans people aren't freaky, they're people. There's a great video with Neil deGrasse Tyson and Ben Shapiro, and take what you will about these two men, these individuals. But in that video, Neil deGrasse Tyson basically says the fact that we express ourselves on a spectrum and there is no scientific evidence as to why we do that, that is an interesting frontier to study the why we express ourselves on a spectrum, or express ourselves in this mosaic of ways. And he even said he doesn't care who studies it because it's real and it's there. And then Ben Shapiro kind of tries to poke a hole in that argument by asking how to classify this and where to classify this field of study. And this is the truth, I think. And this is where I get to. Two things are easier to control than an infinite amount of things. And as humans and as people, we are always looking for patterns, for categorization, to understand, but more often control. We all have these biases, and it is impossible to escape bias, regardless of who you are. It is impossible to escape that bias because we all have our own specific perception, and our perception is, and this is wild, so I'm going to get close so that you hear this, so that I hear this. Perception is our reality, and that is scientifically proven. We have scientific evidence proving that our perception of our world, particularly at the quantum level, can significantly influence the actual state of reality due to the observer effect. where the act of observing a particle can alter its behavior, implying that our perception actively shapes what we perceive as a reality. This concept is often associated with the notion that reality might not exist independently of observation. And if particles and atoms are the building blocks of the universe, if everything in this universe is made of those particles and made of atoms, certainly this has to be true as well. That we create these biases and we create this perception. And if we perceive something in a certain way, we start to believe that that is a reality. And when you only believe that there are two genders, it's easier to see only two genders. And so, because you can only see two genders, it's easier to control the masses because of those two genders. If we are perceiving our reality and something changes by that perception, we are able to change. We are able to change our perceptions. We are able to expand that perception into a beautiful mosaic of expressions. And it's easier to control people when it's two cups, two things. It's easier to control these two things, yeah, than it is a beautiful mosaic. And that's what Trump wants: control. Duh. Not leadership, not unity, and not a golden age for America, but control. Donald Trump said in his speech, and I quote, "And our top priority will be to create a nation that is proud and prosperous and free." And does that not include the freedom of expression? My pride in my gender and my freedom to express it will make me free. Because I think a golden age for America is one that recognizes all Americans as who they are and who they want to be. And this is only the beginning. Again, I am not an expert on gender studies, gender policy, or even gender expression. Look, I started this, like I said, in 2020, so I'm still a fledgling in my journey. And even in my own expression, I'm still confronting the internalized and unpacking shame and fear and my own phobias about worthiness, and that if I'm doing this wrong and I'm not actually gender fluid and I'm just playing pretend, and I'm lucky and I'm privileged because I can pass. I know what I look like. I know I can have the privilege of choosing how I look and what I look like when I go out in public to fit the mold of what society tells me I should look like. And I don't want to do that anymore. I don't I don't want to live in fear. I don't want to hide in the perceived safety of masculinity. And so my heart is emboldened for my trans siblings who are further along in their journey, whose journey includes physical and hormonal transformations to become the versions of themselves that they were always meant to be. They are entitled to that, just like I am, and just like we all are. We all are entitled to our own expression. We all deserve actualization. And I know that that welcomes derision, because to live outside of the binary is an act of resistance, and that creates fear. And when people are afraid and they put that fear onto someone else, we do it so we don't have to sit with our own fear. And I know I'm guilty of that. But that kind of fear, the fear of the unknown, is a perception as well. And it's shit when people have that fear and have the means to enact policies that affect millions of people. Simple as that. It sucks. We are entering a time where critical thinking is even more important. The information we hear, the sources of that information, and the reason this information is being shared, all of this deserves much more critical thought. I think we can leverage our individuality and listen to our intuition to know when something is wrong. And to those who question the existence of trans people or question my existence because I'm exploring my gender, like, how are we hurting you? How am I hurting you? My expression only really affects me. If your expression comes at the cost of actively hurting someone else or actively harming someone else, that's an issue. I just want to be able to live my life and explore all of the parts of me. I want to be beautiful and demure and lithe and strong and handsome. And I want to live in a world where I am excited to walk out the door every day, not one where I anticipate something bad happening. But I'm not going to stop living my life. I am not going to stop exploring my gender just because Trump said it was wrong. I didn't vote for him. I didn't vote for you. And I seriously doubt you have any knowledge on gender studies. So, respectfully, jog on. I know that this is only the beginning, and it's going to take a concerted effort to make the changes and to see the changes that we want in this country. And I believe we can get there. It's going to take, again, a mosaic of people coming together and working in different ways to dismantle this heinous, heinous system that hurts a lot of people. But that's all I got. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Stonewall was a riot.